In Ois in Ois Gimel, the Rebbe explains why we cannot really say that all the Yidden have written their own Sefer Torahs and during the time of the Midbar, and they just finished it. Then they were able to finish it like we explained the Torahs that Moshe wrote 13 Torahs on that day. And the Rebbe brings down because, first of all, this is not according to all opinions. There is, according to Rashi, one opinion that the Gemara holds that they did not write it down portion by portion, but only in the end. In this itself, chasuma or not, we have a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, but at least that's the pshat according to Rashi that they did not write it down, so there was no Sefer Torahs written before, according to that. But the most important question that the Rebbe asks, we don't find anywhere that outside of the 13 Sefer Torahs that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote in that day, which he gave, he one to each tribe and one was put in the Aron, we don't find any other Sefer Torahs. And this would have been something that would have been mentioned if that was the case, that everybody just finished up their Torah. Gimel. So let's look inside. This is very difficult to answer. So, Weil Aleph, number one, der Tirutz ken men zogun nor loit man de Omar. This answer can only be said according to the view, to the opinion, as Torah Megillah Nitna, that the Torah was given one, each Megillah, each column, each scroll at a time. So once one part was finished, then the next part was finished. And so they write down each part as it was finished. Now, the other opinion, or that afilu k'manda Omar, or even the Manda Omar that the Griya says, Torah chasuma nitno, the Torah was given sealed as a whole thing. That would almost seem like he didn't write it down, but they write it at the end. But Tosfos over there explains chasuma nitno, kipirush ha-Tosfos, as Tosfos interprets the meaning of chasuma nitno. It doesn't mean that it was only written down after the whole Torah was ready, after all the whole Torah's occurrences took place. But Tosfos learns as das meint shala seder nichtava. It still means that it was written on the seder. As the Rebbe will explain, each section was written down, not immediately after all the parts of that section were ready, then it was all written down. That could have been written, that was written down earlier, not always in the end. What it means, it was in a parsha itself, we find sometimes one parsha comes before the other, so we had to wait, and it's out of order in Mugdam Mucha B'Torah, so we had to wait until we couldn't write it down as it was happening because it wasn't placed over there. So you had to wait till the other thing happened in order to place it. But when the other thing happened, you write it. So it was still written piece by piece, and they could have had it during the time that they were in the desert. But the Rebbe will say, according to Rashi, Rashi learns, no, they didn't write it piece by piece. They only wrote the Torah after it was completely finished. Let's see. The Rebbe explains now, what does it mean, chasuma nitno, according to Tosfos? Das heißt, al haseder, wie sie kommen in Torah. They come in the order the way it's in the Torah. The way, what comes first, second, that's the Torah, that's what was written. But the Baal, which means, but it wasn't written as they happened, because then it would be not the order in Torah. The order in Torah is not the way they happened. It's not chronological order. So they didn't write it as it happened, but they wrote it in Torah, as in the Torah. And for that, sometimes they had to wait to write down what happened later, but it comes in the Torah before, so they had to wait for that. That means chasuma nitno. The Baal does ein mugdam umuchar b'Torah. Since there is no earlier or later in the Torah, chronological order is not appear in the Torah, is not the follows the, is not the rule in the Torah. And as and faram parshiyos, and there are portions velchazainen gezogt geworden. They were said lifnei oisam aksum lifneim, before those that were written beforehand. So even though in the written they come later, but they were actually said before those that come in writing before them. So the later portions that are written came before. So in order to keep the order of the Parshias, as it's written in the Torah, hat man sich abgehalten zu verschreiben od die Parshias. They held back from writing these portions, bis es seinen geworden die Parshias welche seine ksuvim lifneim, until it was said those portions that are written before them, so they had to wait for them, so then they can write it down. Und demult hat man geschrieben, de alle Parshias verbunden mit der Parsha Laseda. So then, when the other Parsha was said, you wrote all the Parshias that was connected with that portion in the order. But that still means that they can write the Torah before. But that would learn the way Toysos learns the meaning of Chasuma. Aber nicht Leut Rashi, but this would not fit according to Rashi. Was is mefarish? Rashi explains, as Chasuma nit no meint, what does it mean it was given seal? Lo nichteva atzoif mem. It was only written after all the Torah was finished, at the end of the 40 years. La'achre shenemru kol ha'parshiyos kulam. After all parshiyos were said. So according to Rashi, this doesn't work. So according to the Mandoma, Chasuma nitna. Beis, Bechlal, this idea, tzorich iyun, it really needs to look into, does the Rambam really mean, see the Rambam meant, to sagen, as kol echod ve'echod mi Yisrael, that each and every one of the Yidden, which would mean yeder bar chiyuva, anybody who is already obligated, like a bar mitzvah, like the lane shraibim b'megillis, alla parshiyas ha-Torah, would on their own write in a scroll all the portions of the Torah during the 40 years. Even though he wrote Ekol Echad Ve'echad, but does it mean literally? Ubefrat, especially as a Chelek Godel from the Velcha Zayin and Arayin in Eretz Yisrael, especially that a substantial portion, a big part of those that entered in Eretz Yisrael were born in the Midbar. They were born during the 40 years of the Midbar. So can we say that all those were also, each one wrote the Torah? But Gimel, the main thing that the Rebbe says is problematic with this interpretation, but Divrei Chazal gefindt men nor, the words of our sages of blessed memory, we just only find Kinal as Moshe geschrieben Yud Gimel Sefer Torah, that Moshe wrote 13 Torah scrolls. If every obligated person in that generation, so after the command, you have to write now, if we should assume that they wrote their own Torah scroll, this seemingly should have been mentioned in the words of our sages of blessed memory. Kinal said before, for them was Chazal reden nor wegen the Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah. The fact that the sages of blessed memory are just discussing the 13 Torah scrolls is mashma. It appears as is nit given der chidush achi godel. There wasn't this great novelty as damals seine verändert geworden, that at that point were concluded mer v'samach ribu sifrei Torah, more than 600,000 sefer Torahs. would assume that everybody had written before and they just finished up them. Or that I feel or maybe even they started writing them. If that was the case, we should have found that something mentioned, it's not mentioned there. So therefore, we need to understand the Eibishter made a command for them to write the Sefer Torah. How did they fulfill this command of the Eibishter to write the Sefer Torah? So the Rebbe will explain this by first explaining another question: why people aren't writing Sefer Torahs today when it's a mitzvah. Let's go inside. Dalet. But man das verstehen, behagdim hatmiya mefursemes, by introducing the known surprise, bibald sees a mitzvahs esse, a kol ish v'ish mi Yisrael lichtiv Sefer Torah la'atzmei. Since it is a positive mitzvah for every person and person of the Jewish people to write a Sefer Torah for himself, why don't we see in general by the Jewish people on kama v'kama from Gedolei Yisrael b'frat, especially we don't see by the Jewish leaders that they should actually fulfill this mitzvah. And and at a time when they start after the bar mitzvah, when there's an obligation in mitzvah, it should be right away you have to write a Sefer Torah. From them, from their mitzvah tam, from mitzvahs ksivu lachem, and we start that there is the reason for the mitzvah. The mitzvah is kisu lachem, is vilamdo. And we don't see that when there is an obligation to start learning Torah and to mechuyev b'mitzvahs, that they should right away start fulfilling the mitzvah of writing of the Sefer Torah when there is the obligation, when you become a bar mitzvah or close to it. So l'chayda, so this is let's understand that now. Maybe according to the Rosh explains that the main purpose of the writing the Torah is to learn. And today we study from other books. That takes the place of writing the Torah. So l'chayra, we can answer and say that Tam Dereif, the reason for this, state in the Rosh, it is brought down in the Rosh, and Azo is the halacha, and that remains the halacha. Azo idno shekoisvin Sefer Torah. And that is placed in the shul, and we read it in public. So it's not really meant for individual study. There is a positive mitzvah sasei. It's a mitzvah sasei. Yisrael. For every Jewish person, lichtev chumshei Torah u'mishna u'gemara. Now the mitzvah is to write to the chumoshim of the Torah and the Mishnah and the Gemara, u'purisha and its commentaries, lahagiz bahem, to study in them who one of him and his sons. Ki mitzvahs ksivas haTorah. He explains. The Rosh explains what is the mitzvah of writing the Sefer Torah. He lilmod bo, to learn in it. Hein heim hasvarim sha'adam mitzuva l'koisva. So those are the svarim that the person is commanded to write them. So you're writing those svarim is all the learning that we do, and the svarim does it the mitzvah. Ukipsaka shach, as the shach rules, azoina nowadays is the mitzvah as a nemar davke beilu. That's specifically, it's not even optional, this or the Sefer Torah. Specific, v'loy b'Sefer Torah, davke by this one, not b'Sefer Torah. So that's actually regular svarim that is being bought by mitzvah boys, and get gifts by mitzvah boys. The Rebbe brings down Ubenegeya Stam Gishiribin the Gedrukte Svarim as far as general written or printed Svarim is the Kama V'Kama. So we find many. I feel von die seinen erster Reinigil from Bar Mitzvah, even those who are just going into Bar Mitzvah, kaufen Svarim, they buy Svarim, to learn to study in them. Und Azayarum is the Mitzvah, the Mitzvah from Kisul Lachem. That's where you fulfill the Mitzvah of Kisul Lachem. So that would be the opinion of the Rosh and the way the Shach learns it. Now, it would seem like the Ramah disagrees with the contention that that's the only way to fulfill the mitzvah, that you just by learning and buying a sefer, you don't fulfill yet the mitzvah. You need to write something or fix something. Although there are more rules, as if you just bought it as such and you did not check over anything in it, it's like grabbing a mitzvah from the street, from the marketplace. You're not yotze, you didn't do anything, you didn't write, you didn't look it over. Even those who say that it's okay just to buy this for him, it's not the best way to do the mitzvah. Mitzvah is to be a little involved in the actual writing of it. But the Rebbe says that only that the Ramah says that you can't just buy. He's talking about a Sefer Torah. But the books that we buy, there's nothing to write in them. Is the Din Hanal in Ramah gesagt geworden, nor benegeyet a Sefer Torah. That's only said as far as a Sefer Torah was by Sefer Torah is Faran Achiv Uksiva, but there you have to write the Sefer Torah. Mashenkin Ha'idno. Then is Mekayim the mitzvah mitztam svarim. When we fulfill the mitzvah with just regular books, there's nothing to fix over there. You're not writing them. You're just purchasing the svarim that have been written. Is Oich the Ramah Moide, the Ramah would agree as Mizyoitze the mitzvah durch Kaufen svarim that we can fulfill the mitzvah by buying svarim, by buying books. Commission is born. The Rebbe discussed it in another area in the Kutei Sichos at length. So Memele, we have an answer to the question. The Rebbe introduced this new question: why don't we find that people writing today's Sefer Torahs? And the answer is based on the ruling of the Rosh and the Shach that today's Svarim is books that we purchase, is really learning in them. And even though the Ramah says that you need to write, that's only, we're talking about Sefer Torah, but when you fulfill the mitzvah of Kistul Lachem with Svarim that you purchase, there's no writing there, that's the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. But the Rebbe says that's still not 100% understood, because we don't even find this direct connection that when you become a bar mitzvah to have this svarim to fulfill this mitzvah. Hey, aber in Emerson is just nit kein tirutz maspik, but in truth this is not a sufficient answer. But we don't find in any place we don't see practically as jeder bar mitzvah soll take wer bar mitzvah, that every bar mitzvah, as soon as you turn bar mitzvah, schreiber, either to write or that al koponim magia sein, or at least to look over, or the liknei svarim, or even to buy svarim that we said before that even buying svarim is good. You don't see that. And therefore they'll buy it right away. They're going to have a code of law. Take him as soon as he's obligated to learn. We don't find that people get that right away. So it means that there's has to be another way to fulfill the mitzvah. Can't say that they're fulfilling the mitzvah by just buying their sforim, because we don't see them buying the sforim right away and buy a Shulchan Aruch. We don't see that practically. Oich, in addition, like Kama v'Kama Poiskim, according to many codifiers, the Rosh's opinion that you fulfill the mitzvah with Svarim does not negate the mitzvah of also writing a Sefer Torah. Koilel and Beis Yosef, Bach and der Taz, which includes the Beis Yosef, the Bach and the Taz, Valderech ze Kama v'Kama Poiskim Nochum Shach, and similar many rules after the Shach. The Shach, the Rebbe quoted before, says that's the only way to fulfill the mitzvah. The Rebbe brings down. As I idno, his mitzvah says in Emma Davke be'elu v'loy b'sefer Torah. That's the opinion of the Shach. But all the others, like the Taz, the Beis Yosef, the Bach, and the Taz, and also many codifiers after the Shach, they disagree with the Shach's interpretation of the Rosh. They say that is the Rosh nit oisen. The Rosh was not really trying to mevatel zayin the mitzvah to negate the mitzvah of writing a literal Sefer Torah. But what he means is to add, that today is to today there's an additional obligation to write the Mishnah Torah, the Gemara, and its commentaries, but not to take away from the original Mishnah. Since we're going to say that the original mitzvah remains of writing Sefer Torah, is it so the surprise that we have, it stays in its place that we had before. We don't have an answer. Why don't people write Sefer Torahs today? Because even though there is an additional mitzvah of maybe buying sforim, they're fulfilling the mitzvah, but there's still the mitzvah of the Torah, of writing a Sefer Torah. How come that also many of great of Israel, they were very careful in mitzvahs. They did mitzvahs in the bay to begin with, the right way, even if you can fulfill other way. And they in all opinions. I'm not going to rely just on the Shach. We're going to go according to all opinions. They did not put an effort in to write a Sefer Torah. Not on their own and not even through an agent. So that they fulfill the obligation. Also, according to the codifiers that say that we're not fulfilling the mitzvah just with Svarim, we need to write a Sefer Torah too, as the Rebbe listed all the poskim now. As a mitzvah for Shraim, a Sefer Torah kipshuta, that there's a mitzvah to literally write a Sefer Torah. And the Rebbe says that even those that did write a Sefer Torah at the end didn't write it right away. They took many years to write the Sefer Torah. Nochmer, even the great amongst them that did write a Sefer Torah, they didn't do it immediately after they were obligated the mitzvahs. They wrote a Sefer Torah. Nicht bald by the Erstev Shoris, and didn't even do it when they had the possibility. Maybe when they got by mitzvah, they didn't have the means, they didn't have the funds for that. But even when they had their funds, they didn't do it at the first opportunity. When they had the means, the financial means for that, monetary means, to accomplish the service. But after many years. So how come? So therefore, we have to say that there was some other way they fulfilled the mitzvah. So we have to say, we are forced to say, as the Sefer Torah, even before they wrote the Sefer Torah, the mitzvah, they fulfilled the mitzvah. And as they usually conducted themselves, even if it was just a law by the later ones, they observed it too. Of course, they did it. So they would do this mitzvah for sure. In Anoifel from Lachatchilum Behidur, they would do it in a way that it's okay to begin with, and it's in the most perfect way. And therefore, when they wrote the Sefer Torah later on, wasn't a way just to fulfill the mitzvah, because that wasn't fulfilling the mitzvah. That was for addition. In Ksiva Sefer Torah, their later effort in writing the Sefer Torah is given was nicht der Farvas Frirot gefällt chas v'sholom. It's not because before the writing of the Torah they were lacking, God forbid, kim mitzvah min ha-Torah, they didn't fulfill a positive mitzvah of the Torah, nor als inyan shel Tosafos. This was just made, the Sefer Torah they wrote was an addition, it was a hidur v'chulu, but the mitzvah we have to say they did before. So to answer the question, how did the Yidden in the desert before going to Eretz Yisrael fulfill the mitzvah that was given to them to write a Sefer Torah? The Rebbe introduced, and we don't find that there was any Sefer Torahs written there. The Rebbe introduces the issue: why don't people write a Sefer Torah today? And the Rebbe points to the fact that with Svarim and with other ways, you can't really fulfill the mitzvah according to everybody by purchasing Svarim. You must write a Sefer Torah. And even those who wrote, how did they fulfill in the beginning, after Bar Mitzvah, the opinions that you have to write a Torah? Why don't we find that? We have to look for another explanation. And that explanation that we'll find will apply to the Yidden at that time as well. So first, the Rebbe brings out now that the fact that there is a Sefer Torah that the community owns, that should also be for each individual. And question becomes, does an individual thinks that it's owned in partnership by the community, can each individual also? This is going to be now a whole discussion about Ben Hir and about an Esrik, as we will see in the following Seif Vav. So the Rebbe says, we can say the explanation of it. See, is no by Eden Bechol Tfutzus Yisrael. It is a tradition by Yidden in all places where Yidden live. As in Yeder Kihila is Faran, that in every community exists a Sefer Torah was belonged to Tzibur, a Sefer Torah which belongs to the community. Now, sometimes people own a Torah, they're personal, but they put it into the shul for safekeeping or for use. But sometimes it belongs to the shul. There's a minute that not sometimes, that's the Rebbe says, it's tradition. In Tzugab, in addition to them, that individuals write a Sefer Torahs, as they presented to the shuls. Now the Rebbe says some people just donate it to the shuls, but some people just hold it over there. They give it out well, meaning it becomes part of the shul. Ubekamo is faran ashaklavetaria, and by some there is a question, a debate. Do they remain the property, the possession of the individual, but it's just in the Sefer Torah, or they become the community's property? But that's another discussion. But besides that, there is a minhag Yisrael that the community itself, as the tzibur nemt, that the tzibur takes or dinkt, hires zusammen a sefer, together they hire a scribe, if they're kesiva for the writing, or their kniya or purchasing for a sefer Torah. Was the Sifrei Torah Zainen Zicher Kinyan Atzibur. Those Sefer Torah that were purchased and written by the community and the funds of the community, that becomes the position, the property of the community. Every year has a part because you are part of the tzibur. Now the issue is, if a thing which is owned by the community, can you fulfill your personal obligation? That's another debate. So while we're saying that the community writes it for everybody and you have a part in that, but can you fulfill your obligation with the community's owned Sefer Torah that you have a part in? Is aber benegeya zach was belonged to a tzibur. So with regards to an item that belongs to the community, to a community, is do atzibur, many people, is do ashakla vetaria. There's a debate, simen ken if them zogun, whether you can say about this as the yochid als prat, that an individual as a detail, as an individual, hot an eigenem chelik in them, he has his own part. Because you're part of the community, can we say that you have your own part? Borum atzibur kol, because when we say atzibur, a community, a kohol, doesn't just mean combination of many individuals. This is a new entity. So it's not like you don't find yourself over there. That's why you give it over very well, which means you shouldn't be able to tell which is your gift, which is your money. You mixed it in with everybody else, so you can't say, because it's no longer individuality here. It's a new entity here. It's a community over here. So certainly, a tzibur is issue whether you can count it for your mitzvah individually. But even the Rebbe says, even if it's real partnership, if two people should write a Sefer Torah, Nachmer is also an issue. I feel that we consider this is considered to be like a Torah scroll of partners. There are many of the later codifiers, they hold, as you cannot fulfill your obligation with a Torah scroll of partnership together with somebody else. Their opinion is that everyone must write their own Sefer Torah, not even in partnership. So how does it help that the community writes a Sefer Torah, which is first of all community Sefer Torah, and second of all, even if it's partnership, it's also questionable according to some. Is a chodra kusha leduchta, so we get the question back to its place. Wie kann man jetzt sein the mitzvah von ksiva Sefer Torah? How can we fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah mit habunachelik and a Sefer Torah shall call by having a part in a community Sefer Torah? And the Rebbe says, well, we have, if it's meant lechatchila, written in a way that when you're learning it and when you're getting the aliyah or when you're using the Sefer Torah, and that you should be yours, and that's the condition, that works just like by an esrog. By an esrog has to be yours, and yet we find that you can be yotzu with the community esrog, as the Rebbe will explain. Is the bir zayin, the explanation. By esrig minov is der din. The halacha is by an esrig and the species. The halacha is as miznit yoytze b'shutfus. Cannot fulfill the obligation if you and a partner own the esrig or the species of the four species. But as dav zayin kula shaloyim is be entirely your. Unafo became, and yet is noyegim the custom b'mokim shein esrig motzui, that where there is no esrig that is available. Problem, we can't get an esrig for each one. Shekol hakol koinim esrog b'shutfus. The entire community purchases an esrog in partnership. Mipnei shekivon shekonu lotzis boy. Since the reason why they purchased it is to fulfill the mitzvah of esrog mistam have. So the assumption is it's as if ki'ilu pirush, as if they articulated specifically shekol hakol noistim chalkom, that everybody gives their part. L'chol misha neit loy lotzis, by anybody who takes to use it, we're all giving it to him in a way almnas sheyachzeru olam, to give it back to them. So they're giving it to him like a maton amnas la'afsu. Well, derech zeh yesh loymar benid nedan. So similarly, we can say in our case, people can't afford to write the Sefer Torah. And everybody buys it together for the purpose that everybody should fulfill when their individual mitzvah. Since it's a condition where people are lacking wealth, not everyone has the possibility to write a Sefer Torah for themselves. Is der mit, was der Kol schreibt a Sefer Torah zusammen. So one fulfills the obligation with the fact that the community writes a Sefer Torah together. Weil mistame havi ki'ilu pirshu shekol hakol meistim chalkom. Because even though it's not specifically mentioned, but it is as if all the people give their part to each one. So yedem einem from kol, to each one of the community, to give it back to them. So we're all donating it now for that person's use. Kidei as the Sefer Torah ksiboso. So that this Sefer Torah and the rights of Torah soll den ganzen gehören zu ihm. It should belong entirely to him. It should be his personal. Kann jetzt sein the mitzvah from Kisvu, so that he should be able to fulfill the mitzvah of writing and learning in it. But you say to Mizu, and more, it's not even a partnership. So it's not a partnership Sefer Torah. No, it says Vizman Hadorush, and the time that is needed in Ganzen Zainem Melachatchila come on, it's entirely his from the beginning, as we say later on. It's given away to him in such a way that to begin with, it's as if he himself wrote the Torah as the Rebbe would write. And let's say, for example, somebody gives you funds. I'm just adding that myself, the funds to write the Sefer Torah. So once it's your funds, that's yours. So here the community, as if donated to you the funds to be yours, that it should be your Sefer Torah, and when you learn it should be your Sefer Torah reading, and then you give it back. So when the other one learns it, it's as the funds were given to him, so he's writing the Sefer Torah and belongs to him, as the Rebbe will explain. Will come on. Ches. Now there is a difference here, because by the esrog, the point is that it must be his. But the Rebbe needs to explain, esrog being yours, we can say, okay, we give it to you. But by the Sefer Torah, we don't need it just to be yours, we need you to write it. How do? The Rebbe is going to explain that even the writing becomes like you're writing it, even though it's more than just saying like the esrog is yours. Let's look inside. It doesn't seem like this is really a good answer to compare this to esrog and saying that the esrog is yours, so the Sefer Torah is yours as well. But Sefer Torah is not gleich to esrog, because the Sefer Torah is not equal to the esrog. It's not the same. By esrog is genug as the esrog is konui tzuim shaloi. By the esrog, it's sufficient that the esrog is acquired to you, that it becomes yours, that it is yours. When you're doing the mitzvah, and the riber helped was their call is imakna their esrog. That's why it helps that the entire community who bought the esrog gives him the esrog l'shas netilosei for the time when he's going to use it is going to be yours. Mashenke b'sefer Torah, as opposed to b'sefer Torah, is not genug. It's not sufficient as it'll hold b'sefer Torah that he should have a sefer Torah. So when you use, you have a sefer Torah. It's yours. Everybody gives it to you. Everybody has to write it. Whether you yourself write it or you send somebody to write it. Was their far? Because you have to write it, is their din. The halacha is even if your father inherits you a sefer Torah, mitzvah lichter mishaloi is a mitzvah to write your own. Unochmer, and even more than that, not only must you have your own, you have to actually fix a little bit in that Torah. Is a feel of an einer koivta sefer Torah. The law he quoted before Le'egia by David didn't look anything over. It's like grabbing something from the marketplace that's not fulfilling that. You didn't write it. So here we need him to write it. We don't just want him to use it. How could he fulfill with the Sefer Torah? He didn't check it over. It's like, even if it's not his even fully, the writing, he didn't do the writing, and he's not checking it over. What does it accomplish? That everybody, the rest gives it, says it's yours. We give away our part to you. So you had add to each one of the community. Soif. At the end is noch als nicht besser verkaufen. That wouldn't be any better than buying. And the Ramos says, Alena Sefer Torah, then you're buying yourself, you're still not Yoitza. It's like grabbing from you have to look something over. How does that help? And there's a difference over here because over here, we're actually saying at the time that it's being purchased, at the time it's being written, the time it's being left over, you are as if you are the one that is doing it. The person is an agent of you to do it. It's different than when you buy a Sefer Torah, somebody else wrote it, you inherited it, you have to be Magiyah. Over here, we're counting it as if you're doing it at the time. Is the explanation in it is, we're talking here about a community scroll. Was belonged to tzibur that belongs to the community. Ubemele is do if them their klal. So by here there is the rule as leiv bezdin masna aleim, that it is the heart of bezdin that conditions on you. We don't even care what the tzibur themselves thinks. It's the heart of Bezdin, the kavona of Bezdin, thus haste. As the aknos as sefer Torah lekol echad ve'echad, that everybody gets the sefer Torah individual is nit mitzad yedin yachid befrat. It's not that each individual of the people that owns gives it to you. Nor valev Bezdin masna is makna sefer Torah lekol echad. It's the Bezdin's heart that gives the gift to each and every one. It's not the people that are doing it. It's the Bezdin that is doing it. And based on this, we can say, as der Masne from Leib Bezdin beniten zeh, that when Bezdin conditions in this case is nit nor as the Sefer Torah zol zayin shaloi, not only that the Torah should be his, nor noch mehr, but more as oich di ksivas ha-Torah is for him, but also that the writing of the Torah is for him. Gleich b'shas ksivas ha-Torah, immediately when you write the Torah, is laid based in masna, the Bezdin's hard conditions as the kesiva is beshlichus from yednem einem from them kohol, that the writing is as agent as each individual from the community. Und b'shas wird darf mekayim sein der Velando in der Sefer Torah, when he will need to fulfill the mitzvah of studying in this Sefer Torah. Be'ez aliyos in Torah, when he gets aliyah in Torah, is as in a Sefer Torah, welche is geschrieben geworden bloß für him. It's in a Sefer Torah that was written for him. That's what the condition that Beis Din makes on the Sefer Torah, that it should be written for him, that it is his Sefer Torah to begin with. That's the Beis Din's condition on this public Sefer Torah. Beis Din darf odem tnai nit sagen befeirish. Beis Din does not need to give us this condition articulated, them Sefer to describe, v'shraib the Sefer Torah. The rises of Sefer Torah, weil der inyan from leiv Beis Din masna, this idea that Beis Din's heart makes the condition is a fila when jener weiß nicht von them, even when the other one doesn't know about it, und tracht nicht wegen them, doesn't think about it. As we find in many places. Say, for example, beim Din Zalocha for the shame, Shisha Dvorim Hazavach Mizbach, that the shechted, when you shech the korban, you have for the purpose of six things, was af misha loyhoya beliboy the shame achas mikol elu. Even when a person shechted and didn't have and needed to have all these six kavanas, but even if he didn't have all these six kavanas when he shechted, it's kosher. And the reason is shetnai bezdin, because it's a condition of bezdin. So if it's leiv bezdin masna, we don't need anybody to know that is the thing that happens even without saying. So the Rebbe says, so what happens, those who are born after the Sefer Torah has been written already, how are they fulfilling? They weren't even there, and their chiyuv started later, but you're always checking the Sefer Torah. Whenever you check the Sefer Torah, which is the Hagah, then that is like they're writing up. So based on this, we can say even more than this. Also those who were born. Then with their call not geschrieben the Sefer Torah. After the community has written the Torah, was the late best in Masner from Shas Ksiva. For Shas Ksiva. Then we can't say it would seem that the Beis Din's heart to make the condition that it's written for each one individually at the time of the writing is l'chayre nitchal. That seemingly would not rest, would not. There's debate about this would not rest on them. Since you need to always look over a Sefer Torah, Bizman litzman from time to time, and anyone who checks the Sefer Torah. Is as if it written the whole Torah. Is Yeshloimer, therefore we can say as the whole Hadeyas, our opinion is laid based in Masne. The heart of Beis Din makes the condition as the Hagos, as Sefer Torah, that this checking of the Torahs of Harechet werden shall be counted wie Ksivas HaTorah, as the writing of the Torah for the Aleph, the Chazayin, and Geboren Geboren, for all those that were born, the Gilul mitzvahs, and they reached the age of the yoke of mitzvahs, Tzvishun Ksivas HaTorah and the Hagah, between the writing and the Hagah. So they should fulfill their mitzvah with the Hagah, with the looking over of the Sefer Torah, which is considered as if they're writing it. While similarly, in between the Hagahs, those who are born in between the new Hagah includes them too. According to this explanation, it will turn out also those communities that didn't hire a scribe to write it, all what they did is they purchased a Sefer Torah, is leiv based in Masna. So what the Beis Din's hard conditions As b'shas that hagof from Sefer Torah mizman lizman. At the time that they will look over the Torah from time to time, is dos b'shlichus v'yedin bar chayuva. That is as agent of each and every one of the people that are obligated, from them called to write a Torah, there is bar mitzvah, is a b'meila, there mit mekayim mitzvahs ksiva sefer Torah. So therefore, he would be fulfilling without the mitzvah of writing the sefer Torah. In Ois Yud, the Rebbe addresses one more issue where there seems to be a difference between esrog and a sefer Torah. An esrog, you only need to be yours during the time that you do the mitzvah. But it seems like a sefer Torah needs to be always yours. The Torah says you have to write the sefer Torah; it has to be for you. So what happens after the moment that it's given everybody, it's for that person, then it goes back to the other person, so he doesn't seem to be owning it at the time. How could you fulfill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, which seems to be always yours? And the Rebbe answers that when the mitzvah was fulfilled mainly by writing the Torah, then that's true. It had to be always yours. Today, the mitzvah is fulfilled also through learning the Svarim. So just to fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah was on the time you get an aliyah. That's when you learn in the Sefer Torah. And at that point, it becomes yours. And then you fulfill the mitzvah. Let's look inside. Yud. We still need to understand, however, it would seem there's another different distinction between esrog hakol and Sefer Torah hakol. An esrog that belongs to the community or Sefer Torah belongs to the community. The Achronim seinen Mechalik, as the Achronim distinguish between Sefer Torah shel shutfin and esrog shel shutfin. They say there's a difference. That if you make buy a partnership in a Sefer Torah, it's not fulfilling the mitzvah, even though by esrog shel shutfin you are. Was euch by esrog shel shutfin pasken der Ramo rules thereto. As im konu letzorech mitzvah yetzim by mistama, as we brought down before, that if you bought it just generally, if they bought it l'chatchila for the mitzvah, then you don't have to your yotze. Man darf nicht ausreden befehlisch, as magitas im zum zweiten Shutev. You don't need to spell out and speak it out and say, I'm giving you Maton of Nas Lahachzir when you buy it in partnership. In this case, you do fulfill the mitzvah if lechatchila you buy it in partnership. This was the purpose that you bought it. You bought it so that everybody can utilize, so the person is kind of that. So, but over here by Sefer Torah, there should be different. Even though over there it helps too, and this should help also, but it's different. Because by the esrog, you only needed to do the mitzvahs. By esrog, you can argue, helped matonam nas lahachzir. Why does it help the gift? And then you have to give it back so that for the time that you need to do the mitzvah, it's yours. Hayois as der esrog dav zayin shaloi belois b'shas netilosei. It needs to be yours only at the time when you're shaking the lulav. As opposed to by Sefer Torah, you need to have it so that you can study in it. It doesn't seem that it will help to give it back. You're taking it to give it back. That instant that you give it to the other one, it's not your Sefer Torah to learn in it. So you're contradicting what you're trying to do. You want to have a Sefer Torah. By giving it back, you don't have a Sefer Torah. But the Rebbe said this is not so. But it doesn't matter that you don't have it all the time. Weil der Chilik zwischen Sefer Torah and Esrog, that would be only true. This would only be in the earlier generations, when their Iker Alimud is given in a Sefer Torah, the main study would be a Sefer Torah. So then you would argue that by a Sefer Torah, you need to own it all the time. But Mashenkin Benegea to a Sefer Torah, as opposed to the Sefer Torah as it's used today, what are we learning in the Sefer Torah? An actual minhag. When are you learning in the Sefer Torah? In them was koydim baba rabbi. You read it publicly. Is b'meila verstandig, so it's understood as a fil loydideis. Even according to the opinion, as miznit yoitzagam laharosh, the mitzvah blois mitzvorim, that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah just with books that you buy, and we need a Sefer Torah, but still, none of Muzach Shraim Sefer Torah, you still have to write Sefer Torah, as the Rebbe enumerated before. All the opinions about it is over nitkin chiyuv, but there is no obligation as the Sefer Torah zol zayin tachas yodeh b'chol esu b'chol shor, that he must own, he should be under his possession, under his hand, at all time and every hour. Says genug v'mahot anegina Sefer Torah b'shas mizmekayim dem v'lamdo. It's sufficient that we have your own Sefer Torah when you're doing the v'lamdo, when you get your aliyah, when is oila l'Torah, and when lent in ir and you're learning it, that is sufficient to him to have the Sefer Torah. The Rebbe also brings down that there's a difference in the partnership of a Sefer Torah and with regards to the Esrog, in the sense that it's not time. Let's see, Yudal. Nocha praten them, another detail. A Sefer Torah shall call is anders va Sefer Torah shall shutfin. A Sefer Torah that belongs to the community is different than a Sefer Torah partnership. A Sefer Torah shall shutfin, a Sefer Torah of partnership is the chalukas Sefer Torah tzvishin zei. How do we divide up the Sefer Torah amongst the partners? Totally in das hashutfim. That hinges on the opinion, what they want, what the shutfim agree to, or what their opinion is. And since learning doesn't have any specific time, there's no time. Not like an esrig, which is a certain time. So it's always, you always got to learn. So taka as Sefer Torah shel shutfim, even if they buy it together, you can't say yitzim by mistam. Brought down the Sefer Torah shel shutfim, you're not yitzim. Why? That was the point that they took it. The Sefer Torah, since they wrote in partnership so that everybody should fulfill the mitzvah, so geben them zweiten matonam nas laharzil, when will nor mekayim sein dem velando. So they wrote the Sefer Torah, so give the other person as a gift. When he wants to do velamdo, it's going to be his. As es kann sein, as beide wollen lernen in demselben, they both want to, beide wish to learn in the Sefer Torah in demselben Zman. They'll both want to do it at the same time. So you can't say that they're giving it for that time. As opposed to when we're talking about a community Sefer Torah. He says, that is being acquired to the community, so they read from it publicly. And we don't have to make any conditions. It's the heart of Beis Din that makes the condition. As B'shas Yedre is the Torah, that when everybody is getting the Aliyah Torah, is the Sefer Torah Zayin, it's his Sefer Torah Shaloi, Unochmer. Not only at that point is it your, as the Ksiva Sefer Torah is given Farim, that the writing the Sefer Torah was for him. Could they to Kenan Mekayim Zayin durch them, mitzvahs Ksiva Sefer Torah, so she can able to fulfill through this the mitzvah of writing the Sefer Torah. Yud Beis. Api kol anal kemen zogen. So now this is how the Sefer Torah generally. This we can say as a derech zeh mit mekayim given that similar to this, the Yidden fulfilled the mitzvah from Ksiva Sefer Torah, the Pamor Rishona, the very first time. That's how they fulfilled the mitzvah. The Baldas is given as man, since it was a time, was is given min hanimna, it was impossible. As jeder Yid kennen onschreiben ma Sefer Torah la'atzmei, for every person, every Jew to write a Sefer Torah for themselves. Ubefrat as velamdo, and especially in order to really learn it, b'mekayim zayin mitzvahs, to fulfill the mitzvahs, you'd have to come, you have to get all the ways to Achodesh Hazeh Lochem in the Parshas Boy. You have to write all the Chumash Bereshis till there. It was impossible to write it all then. But Moshe Rabbeinu Yishrim Farzeh Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah. Moshe wrote for them this 13 Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah for Yed and Shevet, a Sefer Torah for each tribe. They become community Sefer Torahs. And then therefore heart conditioned on them. It was put the condition of just jeder bet lernen from their Sefer Torah, that when everyone would learn from that Sefer Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu farim yeshrim the Sefer Torah, to begin with. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote for him the Sefer Torah. Yesh Leimer, we can say that those gufa is their tam. That actually is the reason favos that tzivu of ksiva Sefer Torah, that the command for writing Sefer Torah is gesagt geworden b'matzav kozeh, was said in this kind of condition when they couldn't do it, as in jenem zman is nit given ken efshorius, that at that time was no possibility, as jeder Yid soll mekayim sein mitzvahs aksiva, that every Yid should fulfill the mitzvah of writing, nor side mit Sefer Torah shall call. The only way to do it is through a community Sefer Torah. This is coming to teach us that this is the way. That's why the Eibishter set it up, that this is the way for the future generations to fulfill this mitzvah. As b'shas amatzah v'ochis b'divu shonim, that when there is a condition, coming many years, that nit yet that it can shraib ma Sefer Torah la'atzmai, that not every Jew can write a Torah for themselves, is the mitzvah melachatchila. The mitzvah to begin with, the right way is mizir mekayim mit Sefer Torah shall call. You fulfill it with the Sefer Torah of the community. Yud Gimel. Kol amur li'il, from all the above that was said, is euch verstandig. We also understand the goydel ha'inyan from koine zayin an ois, of purchasing a letter in a Sefer Torah shall call in a community Torah. Demult is man yoytze the mitzvah, then you fulfill the mitzvah. Nit nor mitzad leib bez the masna, not just because based in conditions, because the based in conditions that community Sefer Torah, but das is moil kinal. That helps. I feel even if you don't participate in writing the sefer by buying a letter, it still works for you. You also have the advantage from a you actually have an action in actuality, giving some money for a sefer Torah. Then you're not grabbing a mitzvah from the marketplace. Nor as if you received it from Har Sinai. Writing the Torah through all Yidden having a letter in a Sefer Torah. But mitzvahs ksiva Sefer Torah is the seam from all Taryag mitzvahs. The mitzvah of writing Sefer Torah is the end of all 630 mitzvahs. But when the Korim Mamish Zeicha sein, so very soon will merit some Sima Golus, the end of exile. Golus Seinu, our Golus, was alle Yidden gehen arois from them, all Yidden go out from it, the Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of the righteous Mashiach, was vet schreiben, Mishnah HaTorah, he will write the double, the second Torah, the Shem HaMelech, because Mashiach is a Melech. King has to write Mishnah Torah, the second Torah, that should be always with him, as the pasuk says. As the pasuk says, that Torah should be with him, and he should read in it all the days of his life. This is Mesichas Yutes Kislev, B'Yisvadi Yisrael Acharze, in the year Tovshin Mem Beis.